And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to now talk about some of the other moves around the NFL, mainly regarding defensive players, and mainly talking about Maxx Crosby. So, there were some questions on whether, Maxx Crosby wanted to stay with the Raiders. Was he committed to the team? He was at Pete Carroll's press conference. And I think that was an early indication on where he stood with the Raiders. And they ended up agreeing to a new deal. He signs a 3-year, $165 million contract. And this also gives him $91.5 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. I feel like we hear this every year. This deal now makes this player the highest paid player in NFL history, the highest highest non-quarterback in NFL history, or the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. We hear that every single year. But, as the cap goes higher and higher, salaries are also going to go up too. But yeah, Maxx Crosby, this is a key piece to this franchise, and they did not want to lose him. And, I feel like Pete Carroll and this regime, they are going to turn this team around. This team will be competitive with Pete Carroll as the head coach. Now, I don't know how long Pete Carroll is going to be the head coach, but I think it'll make him just being there is going to make an immediate impact. And they had to keep Maxx Crosby because, that defense needs some work. And you would think with Pete Carroll being there that it's going to pay off immediately. And Maxx Crosby, in 6 years with the Raiders, is 59.5 sacks. He's a 2-time second-team All-Pro and a 4-time Pro Bowler. But you could not lose him. You did not want to lose him. And I think if the Raiders would have made a hire that, maybe it was a first-time head coach or something, I think Maxx Crosby probably would have wanted out. But I do think with Pete Carroll, he's buying in. And looking at Maxx Crosby's stats from 2024, more specifically, Maxx Crosby on the season, he had 45 total tackles, 7.5 sacks, and 28 solo tackles. And he played in, I want to see how many games he played in, because he actually did miss some time, I believe, with injury. But the Raiders, they could go a lot of different ways with this draft. I mean, they do have a lot of holes that they need to address. Quarterback position, I think running back is also a position of need as well, but that's something they could do later. But defense, I think, is something that, between free agency and the draft, that's something that'll be addressed. But yeah, Maxx Crosby, for pretty much his whole career, has been durable, has not missed time, but he did only play in 12 games in 2024. So, you want to hope that he increases that next year. 2023, he had 14.5 sacks. 2022, he had 12.5 sacks. And looking at the Raiders' cap space, just take a quick look at that. So the Raiders currently have $95 million in cap space. And they just cut Gardner Minshew, so that frees up some more cap space as well. So the Raiders, you would think, are going to be big spenders this offseason. They're a team that definitely could afford a DK Metcalf if they were to bring him in. But right now, you look at, some of the other contracts. I mean, Christian Wilkins is making a lot of money. I wonder if, I guess they'll keep him around, I would imagine, because he has, he's making a ton of money. And I just looked up Christian Wilkins, and the Sports Illustrated article from almost a day ago says, massive Wilkins deal named among worst of 2024. But maybe he bounces back. Because he was brought in to pair up with Maxx Crosby, and it just really did not work out. But I wanted to get into some of the other deals that were made. So along with Maxx Crosby, we also did see the Eagles. They re-signed one of their key players, on defense, and that was Zach Bond. And Zach Bond was, you could say, one of the best signings of the offseason. One of the best under the radar signings of the offseason. They re-signed him, and I was saying the Eagles, I think, are going to make it a priority to try to bring him back because he was just such a key player on this defense. And they went out and did it. They bring him back, they re-sign him, and he will be man in the middle of the field next season. And I wanted to get the specifics of the deal, but for some reason Yahoo Sports was not loading for me. So they bring back Zach Bond. It's on a 3-year contract, and the deal is for $51 million. $34 million guaranteed with $1.5 million in incentives. And this is after they agreed to giving Saquon Barkley a new deal. But they only signed Zach Bond. They brought him in on a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. And they really just did not expect him to have the season that he had. They brought him in to be a rotational player and to contribute on special teams. And he did more than do that. And he had an interception in the Super Bowl. He finished the year getting an All-Pro. He had 151 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and 5 forced fumbles. He had 33 tackles and a pair of interceptions in the playoffs. And one of them was obviously in the Super Bowl. And he was a 3rd-round pick for the Saints back in 2020. So he got a big payday, well-deserved for him. Key contributor to that Eagles Super Bowl defense. And then you also had, and I did talk about this, the Cowboys did sign Osa Odighizuwa, their defensive tackle, to a contract. He was a franchise tag candidate, but the Cowboys were able to re-sign him, and they agreed to a 4-year, $80 million contract, $58 million guaranteed when he was a 3rd-round pick in 2021. And, he started in all 17 games for them. He had career highs in 2024 in sacks and QB hits and tackles. So, that was big getting him back. And you had CeeDee Lamb restructure his deal to open up some more cap space. So, he's an important player on their defense as well. So, getting him back, that was good. But you also had some other moves with teams releasing defensive players. You had the Eagles, they released Darius Slay. You also had the Chargers. They released Joey Bosa after 9 seasons. And the Chargers save over $25 million in cap space. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. A team will definitely pick him up. I mean, there's people talking about him going and playing with his brother in San Francisco with Nick Bosa. That would be quite something, have the Bosa brothers rushing the passer. That might be something the 49ers maybe consider. And then in terms for Darius Slay, I mean, he talked about he either wants to finish his career with Philadelphia or he wants to go back to Detroit. So, we'll see if that ends up happening, if he goes back to Detroit. That would be something. I think the Eagles also are going to release James Bradbury as well. That's also someone that could get cut. But, now they have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean on rookie contracts, so they really don't need him. Oh, yeah, so they did officially, they released James Bradbury. So that secondary from 2022 is pretty much gone. Because C.J. Gardner-Johnson's a free agent, I believe. I don't know if he's coming back. Darius Slay they got rid of. So, yeah, now it's Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. So, but the Eagles, they will, make the necessary replacements. They'll make the necessary moves for those guys. So they'll be all right. They got the young players in the secondary. So, yeah, a lot of moves regarding defensive players. Let me know what you guys think about these moves and the impact of these moves. For the Chargers, it's kind of similar with the Seahawks and trading Metcalf and getting rid of Tyler Lockett. Jim Harbaugh is changing the team up. Putting it in his image. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, those guys, they're from the previous regimes. So and also Joey Bosa just makes a lot of money. So and I think Harbaugh is going to continue to build this team up, and maybe they end up getting a DK Metcalf for the receiving core because that is a need for the Chargers as receiver. But yeah, Joey Bosa, we'll see where he ends up. There'll definitely be a team that picks him up. We'll just have to find out who that ends up being. But let me know what you guys think about what we just talked about all these defensive players, any thoughts you may have. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we will talk about what teams that made the playoffs last year in baseball will miss the playoffs this year. Who has the best chance of doing that? We'll get into all that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.